as we move into activating folks and getting people to support this campaign, we wanted to take a little bit of time to really establish some working agreements and some community values. So a good place we thought to start, since this meeting is being co-facilitated by Lawrenceville United and Lawrenceville Corporation, is to share what our organizational values are, which really underpins all of our work that we do. So I'll start with Lawrenceville United. I mean, these are values that we've spent a lot of time with our board, which is elected by our membership and represents Lawrenceville residents. So community engagement, we really believe in the power of everyday residents who are the most impacted by issues in the community. And we prioritize those voices to guide all of our decisions and advocacy. I think another really important organizational value of ours is equity. And by that, we mean we strive to create opportunities and remove structural and institutional barriers for all, both within the community and within our organization, but I should say too, within this campaign, thinking about who is most impacted, who has most been harmed by change in Lawrenceville, and how can we be acknowledging that and using that information to remove those barriers as we move forward with this particular campaign, but in all of our work. And then diversity and inclusion, believing that diversity is indispensable to our vibrancy as a community and prioritizing meaningful opportunities for leadership across IDIT. So just highlight a couple there that I think are particularly relevant here. And then I'll turn it over to Lauren for LCs.
Thanks, Dave. And I won't spend too much time on this, but just, we'll say that our vision and values were actually updated by our board about 2.5 years ago. Our board is made up of 1/3 residents, 1/3 business owner, and 1/3 kind of institutional partners or community development experts. And our vision and values are very aligned with what you just heard from Dave from LU. But I did want to point out that, in terms of Lawrenceville Corporation's vision and what we're really trying to reach and achieve here is an accessible neighborhood. We talk a lot about accessibility, making sure that small independent businesses flourish, open space, housing for all, opportunities for all. And that's kind of a shift from where the organization was in the past too. When we updated our vision and values, we really came to embrace some of the stuff that LU's been talking about. And so moving into values, Dave, if you'll just hit the next slide. So similar to LU, we want to advance fairness, justice, equity, demanding dignity and respect for people and community. So thinking about this process, how we can respect one another as we work together as part of this campaign. We want to empower the community and all of our partners to be sort of organizers and activists with us in this work. And we really want to inspire thoughtful, honest, inclusive community participation. And those values, you can kind of feel them or see them working through the way we've handled some community planning process and what has been born out of these plans as recommendations or as themes. Just want to touch on the Upper Lawrenceville Vision Plan. So this was actually created in 2015. So it's a little more dated within our plans, but still very relevant. Because of where Amazon is being planned for, we did want to pull out some of the priorities that came out of the plan. And a big piece was really the acknowledgement that industry is essential to our neighborhood's past and future. And so as an organization, as organizations, as the community, we are not opposed to industry and to the type of work that got Lawrenceville to where it is today, and so many of the families in our neighborhood, but that we value businesses that don't bring negative impacts, such as traffic noise, air quality, water quality, negative impacts on the quality of life of the neighborhood. And that Upper Lawrenceville was seen as a place with a lot of opportunity and a place where people could make and grow things. And that we really wanted to prioritize supporting those entrepreneurs and makers and those who have come to call Upper Lawrenceville or Lawrenceville home. Can move into the next. We completed a Butler Streetscape Design Guidelines or Streetscape Plan in 2019. It did specifically call out recommendations across Butler Street, and specifically for 51st and Butler and McCandless and Butler. So that's right where, you know, this facility is being planned for. But the whole plan is really focused on accessibility, prioritizing people over cars and over development, and making sure that people are safe. And really making sure that, you know, the streetscape and the traffic patterns all align with kind of the scale of the neighborhood. And this is sort of all culminating in our work that we're doing now, and the process and the way that Lawrenceville United and Lawrenceville Corporation are approaching our planning within the CLAC site looks a little different than planning that we've done in the past. And we're really excited about that. You know, when we do work now, we realize that it's not just about Lawrenceville, but it could be setting precedent for other communities. We've seen that with the work that the community that LU has done around inclusionary zoning, right? That the Lawrenceville community worked hard to introduce that, and now that's become a precedent or template for other neighborhoods that are introducing it in their own communities. So we've realized that what gets done here might set that precedent. And as two fully staffed organizations, I think we understand the responsibility that we have to share lessons learned, to share our time and our energy with other communities that might not be as resourced, as well resourced as we are here. And so as we think about this Amazon facility, it's not a case of, you know, we don't want it here as long as it doesn't go in Lawrenceville, but like, how can we also support other communities and set a precedent that others can use as well? We really want to center voices that have historically been excluded and marginalized. When we look at who has participated in our planning processes in the past, there are huge populations of people that weren't a part of that and weren't at the table. So we're really focusing on that with the CLAC site and making sure that we're doing a lot of outreach and specifically including those, including people in that process. And what's been exciting to hear from the community, the priorities that Lawrenceville is telling us they have now, it all centers around community health, environmental health, you know, preserving history, affordability, and opportunity. So even though the CLAC site is different than the Amazon site, we know those are community priorities. And so we're going into this process thinking about all of that.
And coming into the Amazon, you know, specific conversations that we've had to date, you know, we've also had a lot of conversations in the two large community meetings, as well as read all your comments in the surveys too, and had many conversations with you in between meetings. And we wanted to kind of reflect back a lot of the things that we've heard and that have been discussed in previous meetings that I think can underpin like what are some of our working agreements moving forward. So one thing we've heard a lot from both folks who are against this proposal, but also people who are for the Amazon warehouse in the survey that originally went out, is that we do want good jobs in the neighborhood, that especially jobs for lower skilled workers, because of just how much of the job opportunities that have come up in the neighborhood, especially along the riverfront, have been very high skilled jobs in tech and robotics, that accessible jobs are important, and economic opportunities for our most vulnerable, most marginalized residents is important, and that Amazon workers themselves are our neighbors, and so we needed to be treating them as our neighbors and thinking about, you know, what Amazon workers needs as well. Solidarity with other communities. So Lauren touched on this, but we have had a number of conversations around like it's not just being about like our goal here is not just to push this to a different community that that may have less capacity to fight it. We want to be in solidarity with other communities. That means working with other communities that are dealing with the impacts of Amazon or warehouses, you know, making sure that our actions here are not negatively impacting other communities around us, and that we're sharing lessons learned and finding opportunities to work together as much as possible and where it's appropriate. The need to work in coalition. So, you know, campaigns really depend. There's a reason why we're called Lawrenceville United, and that's because working together makes us stronger. It makes us and it gives us power. So working in coalition is hard, and it's tough to keep everyone together, moving in the same direction. But it's important, especially going against a very large company, the wealthiest company in the world. So, and then we wanted to kind of name too and this came out of a lot of the conversations that we've had with other communities that have like are kind of reflecting back on campaigns that they've had around Amazon, was there was very frequently an attempt to label their concerns as NIMBY, which stands for not in my backyard, or as anti-development. And to give like, I think what I found a good definition I liked of NIMBY earlier today, which was that, describing an attitude where a person objects to the sighting of something perceived as unpleasant or inconvenient or hazardous in the area where they live, especially while they raise no such objections to similar developments elsewhere. So kind of the idea that like, oh, I'm fine with like pollution as long as it's not like, next to my house, or I'm fine with, I support affordable housing, but just not next to me, right? This is a pattern of attitudes that often come out in community meetings and when we're talking about development and community planning. And I think it's important that we try to avoid that. I think it's also not just because we don't want to be like that as a community, but also because it's tactically smart, because we're already seeing this with, even posting about this community meeting tonight, we heard from people who were starting to label these activities, like this meeting as a NIMBY thing. So I think it's important for us, if we want to actually win and have legitimacy with a broad group of people, that we really avoid that trap, and that we're really thoughtful about how we're talking about this and communicating it and what we're for here, and not just what we're against. Something that's come up in previous meetings has also been collective versus individual action. So a big topic of conversation in our last meeting was around like, well, what can I as an individual do to divest from Amazon or to support local businesses, these kinds of things. I think there's, we can definitely talk about that. There could be ideas, I think, that get shared, of course, but we also want to, use these community meetings for collective action too, because that's where our real power lies. We all have different experiences, perspectives, skills, time, and resources to offer. And that's great, right? We want a diverse group of people lending a hand. We are two small staff organizations doing a lot of other things besides thinking about Amazon. So we need your help, and we need folks with a variety of skills that we don't have in our offices. And we really saw that in the sign up that came out of our last community meeting of ways that people wanted to offer support and get involved. And then, we also have to take the time to engage the broader community and not assume that the 25 people or 30 people in this Zoom here tonight are the entire community. We're going to need to continue to engage folks around the neighborhood, and even especially people who don't typically participate in these community planning discussions, like Lauren was saying. And we need to meet people where they're at. I've had a lot of conversations with particularly like legacy residents, people who've lived here a long time, who remember Sears Outlet and the job opportunities that provided, and are thinking about this as a job opportunity for the next generation of kids. So and are initially very supportive of this. And they're, we put out a survey, and 2/3 of the people who responded were against this proposal, but that also means 1/3 of the people were supportive too. And we need to meet our entire community where they're at, have discussions. I see that I can't read the chat right now, but I know there's a lot. I think there's things happening in there. So would one of my co-hosts share? Do we need to catch up here at all?
Yeah, no, there was just there was a question as to, is our council person engaged in this? And I did say that we've been regularly meeting and talking with the mayor's office, Councilwoman Gross, and state reps Kincaid and Innamorato, but we can certainly follow up with Councilwoman Gross after this meeting as well.
Thanks, Lauren. So that's kind of what we've heard in this process so far, which brings us to some proposed working agreements for as we start getting people involved in this campaign. Again, we think it's important that we talk about this and not just assume that we all, know how we're going to deal with each other as we, break out into breaking groups. So, and again, I think like, I want to stress that this is not just about like, you know, well, of course, like everyone feeling respected in this space is critical. Also, this is just like a tactically smart strategy for if we want to build collective power, we have to be very intentional about how we're doing that. So, so some proposed working agreements that we threw together based on everything, all that context that we just presented on. And this is a starting place, and we want to hear from you about whether this feels right, whether these are agreements that we can actually agree to, or if there are things that are majorly missing. So we'll just go through this real quick. So we'll maintain respect for each other and meet each other where we're at, you know, similar to what I was just talking about, that people have different orientations towards Amazon, and we're not going to treat folks who feel differently about it as, you know, beneath us or stupid or something like that. We need to meet our neighbors where they're at and understand the place they're coming from and listen. We will not denigrate groups of people. We won't say things like, you know, well, Amazon workers are all like XYZ, or, you know, all of the new people who come to Lawrenceville are like this. That's not a great way to it's not a great energy to bring into a community meeting. Speak from your own experience. Don't make assumptions about others. You know, don't speak on behalf of other people. Going back to the equity which we talked about, you know, in some of our organizational values, we will prioritize engagement of, center the voices of marginalized groups. That is really an important thing for us at LU. And, you know, I think we have to admit that like this process to date has probably not achieved that goal yet. So we're, you know, one thing we really want to talk about with you tonight is how can all of us work to make sure that we're engaging the full community and getting all perspectives into the conversation. We'll have solidarity with other communities, as we talked about. Everyone has something valuable to give. You know, no voices are more important than others here. Everyone will have an opportunity to speak and be heard. Kind of that make space, take space idea of like, you know, let other people have their voices heard, because we want to make space for everyone to contribute here. And consider power dynamics. Who has power in this room? Again, kind of going back to the equity piece. You know, folks from identities who traditionally have more power over others, like be aware of some of the privilege you're bringing in. Maybe take a step back so that other folks, so that we can be centering the voices of other identities. Accept non-closure. So as I shared with that organizing cycle, like this is we're gonna need to strap in for a long haul strategy here. So we're not gonna solve everything, you know, in one Zoom community meeting. And we'd ask that you just kind of be patient, commit to a long-term strategy. And then, you know, this last one is something that really, you know, I think is important too, which is, I know we're all here to hopefully get a better outcome out of this particular site and this particular project, but also that the process itself is very important, right? That us coming together and sharing our hopes and dreams for our community is, of course, very important to this Amazon project and building our collective power as a community. But it's also important for whatever's next. That the developing skills and relationships between neighbors is an important end in and of itself, and helps us to build power for future projects that might come down the pike, future things in the neighborhood that we need to respond to. So, you know, keep in mind that the process is important too, and not just the outcome. So that's what we came up with. Would love to hear from folks what your reactions are to this, if this feels like something we can, and you know, our intention here is that as this campaign goes on, we can continue to reflect back on these, put these up in the beginning of meetings, and hold ourselves accountable to these working agreements as we get more people into this work.